Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of 52 Must See Movies and Why They Matter. They are all gotten from this book here, put out by Turner Classic Movies, written by Jeremy Arnold, with the forward by the late, great Robert Osborne. And this week we are talking about a rather big movie in length, and big movie when it comes to a really big name classic that I don't think a lot of people know about, but a lot of classic film lovers really, really like a lot. And that is The Best Years of Our Lives, which is a film directed by William Wyler. But before I get into that, I'm accompanied once again by my friend Stephen Billings. Stephen?
Hi, how are you doing? Hello, everybody. Yes, best years of our lives. This was my first time seeing it, and I love this movie. This movie. And it's also we'll get more into it, but like this is a Best Picture winner, and it's one of the ones that I feel really good about it winning Best Picture because it really is freaking good.
Yes, this is a Best Picture winner for the year of 1946, right in the middle of the 1940s, post World War II, and the movie is very much a post World War II movie. It is discussing the war directly. For those of you not familiar with this series, we will be discussing spoilers throughout, so be forewarned that that's what's going to be happening. If you don't want to be spoiled, go away, go far away, but then come back after you've seen the movie. Like Steven said, this film was critically loved. It actually won 7 Oscars the year it came out, including Best Picture, but also won Best Actor in a Leading Role for Frederick March, Best Actor in a Supporting Role, um, Harold Russell, who played the character who was missing his hands. Um, Also, it won for Best Director for William Wyler, Best Screenplay, Best Film Editing, Best Music. Yeah, critically loved to say the least, and it's a great movie. Like Steven said, this is a fantastic movie. Just quickly, the overall synopsis of the film, because the movie is 2 hours and 50 minutes, we can't really go plot point by plot point. We'll be here for a very long time because it is a very long movie. So overall, this film takes place, like I said, post World War II. 3 veterans are coming back from the war. One is portrayed by Dana Andrews. One's portrayed by Frederick March, and the other one is portrayed by Harold Russell. And all of them are coming back. They're coming back home to this place called Boone City, and the film is about them assimilating back into their lives, back with their families, back with their old jobs, back with the place that they grew up in, or the place that they lived, and all of the complications that go with that. I love how this movie feels so contemporary in that regard because it is touching on a lot of things that are still happening today. um, we are still have veterans coming back from Afghanistan, Iraq, or wherever, and they have to assimilate back into society. They have to find jobs again, or go back to their old jobs, go back to their families, etc., and they have to deal with a lot of problems. Whether they were injured during combat, whether they have mental problems with post-traumatic stress disorder, or back then in World War II, I don't think they didn't call it PTSD. I think they called it shell shocked or something like that. That the terms keep changing over time, and it's really only kind of post Vietnam era that people are taking these issues very seriously. Definitely now, PTSD is a huge, big problem now, and this movie from 1946 touches upon that. It's kind of amazing how contemporary this movie is, and like Steven, this was a first time watch for me, which doesn't really happen a lot on this list that we've been doing. I've seen most of these movies, and most of these are rewatches, and for Steven, their first time views. But yeah, I came into it fresh, and I was blown away by a lot of the aspects of the movie. Steven, what is just a couple of scenes that were some of your favorites?
Oh yeah, and yeah, I'll say right off the bat, shout out to our man Dana Andrews because he's in one of our favorite movies, Laura. So yeah, he's really good in this movie. He was probably my favorite character. He's kind of the central character in a way, where him and this girl, what was her name?
Her character's name is Peggy, but she
Peggy.
was
Yes.
portrayed by Teresa Wright.
Yeah. And they had this romance that goes out through the whole movie. But a few of my favorite scenes, I'll say I really love, of course, the scene where Fred punches out the asshole as he's working. His friend Howard, who's the one that has no hands, is there, and this guy that's sitting there getting, you're reading his newspaper, basically says that the veterans are suckers and that they were in a war that meant nothing and stuff like that. And, Howard gets upset, it's about to fight him. And then, of course, he can't really do much without hands. So then Fred jumps over the counter and punches this dude in the face, knocks him into this glass, and it's awesome. It's a great
that's a great scene. And I mean, there's so much discussions to have about this movie where there were so many moments where the veterans, like these three characters, came back, and it's almost as if people didn't care. It's like people didn't care at all. It's like, and they didn't know how to deal with them. And some of them, like I said, didn't care at all. Where like they would go to like stores and stuff, and people would just be carrying on like we didn't just have a world-defying, a history-defying war. World War II is one of the biggest conflicts probably in at least modern history, but over the last century. World-defying things happened. And I'm not overselling that because that's kind of how history has shown it to be. I mean, the world was on the brink of changing dramatically. And like Steven said, there was this, in that one scene, there's this guy that says, just listen to the facts. And I'm like, what facts do you have? These guys were there. They saw things that people wouldn't believe. And it's not like World War II is this. World War II is one of the most, I guess, definable wars of all wars. I don't want to go on a huge tangent here, but when it comes to good guys versus bad guys, Nazis, Germany, bad guys, Great Britain, United States, France, allies, good guys. I mean, some wars are more complicated than that. World War I, completely different scenario, but World War II, good guys and bad guys are defined. So that argument there, I thought was just amazing to have in the movie, and amazing that people would have that mindset in the post-World War II world. But this movie touches upon that. I also like, one of my favorite scenes is earlier in the film, is when the Dana Andrews character, Fred, he is staying with the Frederick March character. He's staying with his family because he's had they basically went out and got plastered drunk. The Frederick March character throughout this movie is constantly getting drunk. He is constantly relying upon alcohol I don't know, to dull what he went through in the war, or to himself back into society. When he gets back his first night, he wants to go out on the town and get plastered. He's always drinking all the time in this movie, and I guess that's the way he's just kind of feeling human again or whatever. But the Fred characters, he stays over that one night, and he wakes up in the middle of the night and he's having PTSD nightmares about an event that happened in the war. And we learned that this happens throughout the movie, but this is the one scene where we actually see it, and we get to see what probably a lot of veterans went through during the war, and a lot of kind of the repercussions of that. That's a great scene. There's another scene much later in the film with the Homer character that Stephen was calling Howard.
I'm sorry, yeah.
Homer Howard.
Yeah.
But anywho, is when he is throughout this movie, he's trying to cope with the fact that people don't view him the same way anymore. He can't live the same life he had before at all. And there's a lot of scenes in the movie addressing that. Right away when he comes home, people don't know how to act around him. His parents don't know how to act around him. The girlfriend that he had, or fiance that he had before the war, is actually the most humanistic towards him, the most caring.
She's the most accepting. Yeah, her name's Wilma. Yeah.
I don't know what it was. You have Homer and Wilma, two characters that would be animated, beloved characters.
Yeah, and the great thing about the actor that plays Howard is he's actually a non-professional actor who is actually a veteran, and he's one of the only two non-professional actors to win an Oscar.
I
I
was
don't know. The other
wondering.
one's an Asian actor.
Yeah, I was wondering that myself because he he felt less of a polished actor than the others.
Yeah.
He felt like this was um not something foreign to him as a person, but I mean like Dana Andrews and Frederick March, those are professional actors, you know what I mean? And they felt professional in this movie. He felt more real. He
He
felt
had to be a little bit more subtle,
yeah.
less dialogue and more just like looks and
Yeah,
it which fit the character though. It fit the character
yeah,
because
he didn't feel like he
yeah,
was playing a character, a fictionalized character. And that went really well with him. The
the
scene I
thing.
mean specifically is the one where Wilma came to him. This is later on in the film, and basically said, "My family wants me to move away because it looks like this relationship we're having isn't going to progress any further because we were supposed to get married, but you haven't asked me or you haven't made any plans for that or whatever. You kind of just stayed away from me." And there's a whole scene of his routine getting into bed where he has to take his hooks for hands off, and he's kind of just helpless. He becomes helpless at that point, and he makes a lot of emotional confessions that he feels less of a person. He feels, at least that's the intonation I get. He doesn't say those words
He
specifically,
doesn't
but that's
he
what I
doesn't
felt.
yeah, he doesn't feel like he deserves the love that she's willing to give him because he doesn't feel like he's worth it anymore. He
Yeah,
feels like nothing because he can't do anything himself. He feels like he's having to get everybody to do things for him, which is a very even if you're not somebody that has lost a limb or something. A lot of people feel like that about when it comes to depression, which that's part of what that hits on is his depression. He has a depression about that. And the thing I love about this movie is each of these three characters are going through something a little different coming back home. With Fred, it's about his status. He felt like he had found a place, something he was good at when he was over there. And of course, yeah, he had his problems, but when he came back home, everything moved on without him, and he comes back to having to do the same thing he did before he went into the armed forces. He has to go back and be a soda jockey or whatever they call it, where he's just serving drinks at a drugstore, and that's like he's going back to where he was before. He's not moving up in life, and his wife is this waitress who really just likes the idea of what she thought he could be, and not really the man he wants to be. And and then Al's character is this person that feels like he missed out on everything, and he's just kind of, I don't think he's dealing with things that went on over there, but more with he feels guilty about the things he missed out at home,
yeah,
and he's
definitely.
trying to figure that out. And then of course, like we said with Howard, he just is having a hard time living with himself. And I just
Yeah,
think that this movie covers a lot of great stuff. That of course influenced a lot of other movies after.
yeah. I think one of the reasons why this film is 2 hours and 50 minutes is because we have three complete story arcs that they have
Yeah.
to fulfill. Usually in one movie, it's one story arc for one character that they have to go through, and they take an hour and a half, 2 hours to do that. This is three they have to do complete story arcs for, and all of them have their arcs complete for the most part. The Fred character, like you said, is fascinating to me because he seems the least stable, like of all of them. Stable in the sense not only because of his PTSD, but just his life in general. I mean, we learn early on that he married a girl when he was in like basic training or something. So she basically just fell in love with the fact that he was a soldier. Know each other at all. His wife is portrayed by Virginia Mayo, who was in a lot of comedies at the time. IT a few years later, I believe, than this movie. With James Cagney, and she is kind of not the best person in the world. There's no love there between these two characters because they had no time to really fall in love with one another. That's why the Fred character really gravitates towards the Peggy, the daughter of Al. and really they develop a relationship and a bond and a romance throughout the course of this film. And Fred, like you said, has no apparently has no uh, training or experience in anything else but working at a drugstore and making sundaes and ice cream sodas. But during the war, he was dropping bombs on places and killing people and having all of these different experiences that do not translate pretty much at all back into, I guess, quote unquote, the real world. And this is a lot of issues veterans and people coming back from wars have to deal with. The training and the things they did during that war don't really coincide with what they do here at home.
And that
this
also
in many modern movies.
Yeah, and it also plays back into a scene that Al has with somebody he's loaning money to. There's a veteran that comes in that wants to get a loan to set up a farm, and of course he has no collateral. He has no way to secure that loan. So at first Al's like, I can't do that, and then his friend Howard comes in. He talks with him, and he seems optimistic, even though things are not great for him. And so then that kind of changes his mind, and he's like, you know what, we deserve a chance to make our way because nobody else, we went and fought for our country, and we deserve at least a chance to because we didn't, the war didn't teach us anything that could help us when we got back. We need help from the government and the banks and whatever to start our lives again.
Yeah, that's the arc for Al, where he, like you said, he's missed so much and he doesn't really know quite what to do with himself other than drink. I mean, when he gets home right away, he's like he's amazed about what's going on. I mean, more at his lavish apartment. His children are more self-sufficient now. His wife's more self-sufficient now. The daughter, who has an arc of her own in this film and has a lot of things going on for herself. She works at a hospital, dealing with veterans and stuff like that. She's very much independent, and there's a lot of moments of this film with her discussing her character traits, how much of an independent person she is and an independent woman, and how the war has transformed of women into more self-sufficient. I mean, there are a lot of films and a lot of books you can read and documentaries about what happened during World War II when all of the men went off the war. The women had to take over. The women had to work in the factories and do all kinds of stuff that the men were doing. So they became more self-sufficient. So when the men came home, things were different.
They had
touches on that with her character.
They had to start baseball leagues.
Yeah, in a league of their own. And we've seen a league of their own. And we had to it's fascinating how many things this film is touching on. And it's just fascinating to me. But it does have certain, I guess, Hollywoodized things in it, or at least, golden age Hollywood things in it. The film is very emotional, very sentimental at times. Like I said, there is a romance between the Dana Andrews character and the Teresa Wright character, and that's where his character arc really works as well. They develop a romance almost right away. Like they don't really hit a lot of time. They don't really spend a lot of time wasted on that. And they go back and forth throughout the movie, and you could tell because it is a movie of its time that they're probably going to end up together in the end. And sure enough, they do.
Yeah,
they have a few rough patches. I mean, there's some stuff that happens.
Yeah, I mean, and this is one of them influential things that I'm talking about. Literally, the end of this movie happens in about a bunch of other movies in later on where they're at a wedding of somebody else's, and they're both like at the moment they're not together, but then they look at each other as the vows are being done, and they're like, "Yeah, you know what? We need to be together," because that's how it happens.
Yeah, that happens a lot of times, and I mean, this is 1946. You can excuse, it can excuse that for the most part. I mean, because it wasn't done as much as it's done now. But that is where their characters kind of end up together, and they go through, like I said, a bunch of things happen. I mean, he kind of he kisses her that one time, and then they kind of break apart because she wants to break up their marriage, the marriage that Fred has with his wife, like you can call it a marriage if you will, but Al tells Fred to stay away from his daughter, and then that's where the film kind of their paths diverge in it, and then they come together at the end, like we said. But she's really good in this movie. Teresa Wright is an actress who I believe had already won an Oscar up to this point in her career, so she was coming in with already a lot of notoriety. Yes, she had won an Oscar in 1943 for Mrs. Miniver, which is another movie about World War II, coincidentally, but that's a different movie for a different time. Actually, I'm surprised that wasn't on.
Well, you know, I mean, we're talking about William Wyler. We've already talked about Roman Holiday, and then also Ben-Hur is on this
Yeah,
book.
I believe there's three. Yeah, there are 3 films on this list by William Wyler, who was a great director, which we discussed greatly in the Roman Holiday video we did, I want to say.
It's been about a few months.
He's a great director. He directs this film impeccably well. And like Steven and I have said already, we really love this movie. I don't know, there's so many things to say about it, but I think we've covered a lot of it. If you haven't seen this movie yet, then we spoiled it for you. But if you haven't seen it, or if you haven't seen it in a while, highly recommend watching it, because I had put it off for years. Ray, which is right here. I'd had this for years, just sitting on the shelf, and I see that runtime, and I'm like, oh, 3 hours or close to 3 hours, and I'm like, I'll keep putting it off. But I have to say, for a movie that's 2 hours and 50 minutes, I enjoyed watching it, so it went by rather quickly, even though there were so many things happening and so many characters to kind of work with. The character that's in the movie that doesn't get a lot of play is the wife of the Al character, who's portrayed by Myrna Loy, who is an actress that who's going to be in another film that I think we're going to be discussing later on, The Thin Man. She was in all of the Thin Man films. And she was a great actress of that era as well. She was in a bunch of movies.
Yeah, I really liked her because she was definitely like had become very independent, and she had this way about her where she knew her husband, and she knew that when he came back, he was gonna have problems. It wasn't going to be easy coming back, and wasn't going to make his life even harder by making him feel bad that he was gone for so long, but was just going to do the best to make things good, you know? And I liked how she wasn't complicated. She wasn't trying to make things melodramatic. She just knew she was perfect for Al, you know, like they were solid, and their relationship plays back in to when their daughter is talking about breaking up a marriage. She's like, hey, we had problems too. We didn't have it easy all the time, you know, but their relationship is so, you know, they were so for each other that they're still together, you know? And
you could tell, especially when, like, in certain scenes where Al is drunk, you know, when he's drinking heavily, she understands how to deal with him in that state. I think she understands why he's in that state.
Yeah.
And we talked a little bit about the character of Al earlier and his character arc, but one of the best scenes with him is when he's at that fancy dinner party or whatever, and he has to say a speech, and I guess it's like a work thing or like a business thing and he basically kind of rips his boss, who's sitting right next to him, basically saying that, you know, that working here at the banking and loan really prepared me for what I did during the war. You know, I was on Guadalcanal, and they told us to take that. I was at Guadalcanal, and they told us to take that hill. And I was like, well, you know, do you have any collateral that I'm going to take that hill? You know what I mean? I need some security to know if I'm going to take that hill. So, and the guy says, and the officer said no. And so we didn't take that hill, and we lost the war. And obviously, he didn't lose the war, but he's putting up. He's referencing a scene that happened earlier where the head of his bank called him in because of that loan that Stephen was referencing. The veteran that he gave that loan to didn't have collateral. He didn't have any property or cars or stocks and bonds that he could put up as collateral just in case he couldn't pay the loan off. And he was basically saying that a lot of these people don't have the means to get these loans the way they normally would get these loans, but we should still give them out anyway. And basically that whole speech was like, we're going to do the right thing. We're going to hand out loans to people who need them in order to make their lives better. And of course, when it comes to banking and all the economics and everything, that's not really what they care about. They don't care about making your lives better. They may say that in their commercials or marketing. No, they're here to make They're here to make money.
It's a business. It's a business.
It's a business. You know what I mean?
And another moment I really like too. With Al and his wife is when the first morning after he gets really drunk. And she's doing everything for him, cooks him his breakfast. He's about to give her breakfast in bed. And then instead of going right into getting breakfast for bed, he just takes her and kisses her. Because I just looked at that as a moment where he was like, you're too good. Like, you're just like, why are you helping? Why are you helping me? Why are you being so good to me? I left you for years to go fight in this war. So why are you being so good to me? I need to be loving to you. And I really like that. That was
in a way, it's very much we've touched upon the role of women in the post World War II world. It's kind of a role reversal, if you will. The men are supposed to be those who take care of the women. You know what I mean? That's the way the gender roles were in society at that time. Some people may still believe that that's the way it should be, whatever. But it's very interesting how you mentioned that dynamic where it's been switched around because of the unusual situation of going off and fighting in World War II.
Well, the thing is too is I didn't know there is that aspect, but really I looked at the situation as a mutual respect, and that's why I look at that relationship as being so perfect. They're so good for each other because they have mutual respect for each other, especially after he comes back and they're still so well adjusted because without him. And he has a respect for that, being that he was in the military, he sees that as, his wife is strong, his family's strong, and they're strong together. And I think that in that moment, there was a mutual respect. And he was like, you don't need to do anything for me. You've done enough. And, let me just hold you, thing, and that's what I really liked about that. But yeah.
Yeah. So that has been the best years of our lives. I mean,
it took years to talk about this. How many years have we been talking about the movie?
I feel like we've been here for years already. It's interesting that the movie is called The Best Years of Our Lives because it's the title of the movie is only mentioned once in the movie, and that is with
the wife,
Fred's wife, Virginia Mayo, who's makes I can't remember the direct line, but it's like something about these are the best years of.
Well, she's talking to him. This is in the moment where she's about to divorce him, say that they're going to be divorced, and she's complaining about I never get to go do things. I wasted the best years of my life, waiting for you. And I think I think the title really is just kind of it's a perspective title, that our best years of our lives are always ahead of us, maybe, or something like that. Not that they're really, for her, maybe she thought that was her best years were wasted on waiting on him, but really hopefully for our Fred character, his best years are to come, so.
Yeah. The movie ends on a more hopeful note for the future. I think it's supposed to. It's supposed to be a bit of a message movie for society of that time. But like I've said, it connects well with things that go on today. And because at the end of this movie, everybody ends up, I'd say, in a better place than they were earlier.
Oh yeah, definitely, mentally and status wise, and talking about a couple, thinking of other movies that like Rambo. I mean, Rambo kind of talks about the same subject of coming back from war, of course, in a very different way. But you know, still, you know, the idea of a veteran coming back from war and being treated a certain way, or, you know, and then movie that just came out this year, Thank You for Your Service, was really good. And it really, that movie actually almost feels like almost a pseudo retelling of Best Years of Our Lives, in the sense of there is 3 characters and they all are going through different things. And it's just obviously in modern day and in modern situations. But yeah, this movie has influenced, I think, a lot of movies in many different ways. So
would you say that is one of the main things that makes it essential?
I would say that, and just like you said at the beginning, that it still feels like it's something that is conversation for today. Like the messages of the movie are still, even though, you know, we're past World War II, that the idea of veterans coming back and trying to find their place, and you know, the world still moving on without them, which makes it even harder to find their place. It is still something that's being talked about today.
Yeah, the reason, even though wars have gotten more complex, the treatment of veterans has gotten different. I mean, so many different things have changed and evolved since World War II. The basic tenements, I think, in this movie still hold true, and that's why it's essential. I mean, also the acting is great, the direction's great, everything about this movie I think is very much first rate, and it's definitely worthy to be on this list and worthy to be on many lists. I'm glad I finally got around to actually watching it. Like I said, it's taken me a few years, but finally got to it, and now I'm happy. It's another film to another essential film to cross off the list.
Yeah, I can say I've seen Best Years of Our Lives and that it's worth watching.
Yeah, so just to close everything out, you can find me on my YouTube channel, Cabzilla Productions, as well as on Twitter at Cabzilla06. Steven, where can they find yourself?
You can find me on Facebook, Instagram, Stardust at MovieMan16, Stephen Billings. You can find my YouTube channel, Film Club Central. Not doing as much stuff lately, but there will be more stuff to come.
Great. And you can find all of these 52 must-see videos here on our friend Dan Skip Allen's YouTube channel, The Best Damn Movie Show. And we will be doing continuing on with this series, doing more and more of these episodes until we hit that magic number of 52, which is coming up eventually.
You got a couple more months, we'll be done.
Yes, and we have a few big ones coming up. We've seemingly saved all of the epics for last.
I think we were really trying. Yeah, we were trying to hold off on some of these very long films.
Yeah, we know that, like we mentioned, Billy Wilder's Ben-Hur is coming up. Gone with the Wind, Lawrence of Arabia, 3 gigantic epics in both runtime and scope and just movie history. So we're going to be hitting those big namers coming up soon. So until next time, keep watching those movies.
I know I will.